Hey, this is Basil with Grayson Hobby, and today we're going to do a quick unboxing and a quick build video of the new Dynam seaplane, the SeaWind. Okay, so before we get to the build, let's go over some things about this plane. First off, this is a mid-mount motor airplane, which makes this going to be a pretty good platform for a camera or even an FPV. So when I'm going to build it, I'm not going to put on the canopy yet. I'm going to leave this open so we can eventually later on attach or mount a camera. Is that the plane comes all white. And we do offer two colors, a red and a blue color scheme, but the difference between the two airplanes is not the plane, there's no paint on the plane, the difference is only the stickers. With this being a high mounted motor, one thing that it's not bad or good, I just want to mention, is the ESC wires, the 3 wires from the motor to the ESC, start way up top and they circle all the way around, down the tail, all the way up through the fuselage. Also, one thing that I want to mention out, because sometimes we get some questions about this, is this motor pod, if you notice it from straight on, it's to the right, down and to the right. That's actually normal. That's to offset the thrust from the motor. So if you see that down and to the right, it's not warped, it's just a built-in thrust line. Now, there's one thing I want to mention about this. Once you go ahead and cut this plastic, I would consider this not a water plane. Again, this isn't the kind you could take off and put it back on like some other models. Not saying it's a bad idea to put the landing gear on. I'm saying once you go to the landing gear, it'd probably be either a wise idea to purchase a new plastic set to put it back on, or just keep it as a land plane. All right, so we went over some basics. So let's go put this down and do a quick build on it. The kit already comes with a small screwdriver, but to help you build it, you're probably gonna need a hot glue gun, some foam tack glue, the Dynam screwdriver from the toolkit set, and a 4mm nut driver. Can't get it open. Oh. All right, so we got our manual, and there's 12 steps to get this to be a float plane, an additional 9 steps to put the wheels on. So we're gonna do all the steps, but I'm gonna do some things that are a little bit out of order because I find it a little easier. Everything on the box here. So first we have our stickers. Then we have our wing. And we have our 2 aileron servos installed. We have our push rods. Everything is installed in our wing right here. Then we got our big fuselage foam blocks. So we have our nice fuselage with canopy. Looks like a wing cover. Motors installed, ESCs installed. Again, it wraps all the way around. And all the servos installed, even a servo for the nose gear if you go that option. Then we have a small bag with our wing tips, a small bag with our elevator and rudder. Okay, then we have a box of accessories. Inside our box of accessories, we have a bag with our spinner, our screwdriver, some plastic pieces, and all our screws and nuts and bolts. We have our plastic canopy, our pilots, and our glue for our canopy. Then we have 2 Dynam 10x6 props. And then we have our bag of landing gear and landing gear mounts and accessories and wheels. Okay, before I start any kit, either Dynam or any other kit, what I like to do is take all my hardware I have, place it all out. That way I can figure out what screws go where. For instance, this needs a 6mm screw. I need 2 of them, so I'll make sure I use the right screw. Step 1 and 2 from the manual say glue the pilots and glue the canopy. I'm not going to do that right away. I'm going to do that later on. I may want to make this an airplane, a camera plane. But step 3, so we'll jump to step 3, and that's going to be secure the water rudder with our screws. So with that, we got to unbag our fuselage. So the first step we're going to do is that we're going to install the water rudder. Okay, after you get the piece of the plastic in place, then you simply just screw them in. Okay, step 4 says you glue the wing cover in place. Now, before you go on, what I suggest, since this is going to be a tight fit, what I suggest to do, which I'm going to do here in a sec, is I suggest testing these servos out because, you know, I don't think they're not going to work, but I hate to glue this all in place and then find out it's not going to work. Also, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put a little bit of glue right here, just a dab, because this looks like it's non-structural. but we'll have to come back in just a little bit. So we do have to get in there for if you have to change out your servos or whatever. You'll have a little easier place to glue. Nothing worse than having a whole bunch of glue on here and having to, you know, break the whole entire wing off. Okay, so we're gonna mount this wing. Now we gotta make sure our wires are gonna run through the right hole. Okay, so we're feeding our wires through the little hole, and we're gonna place our wing on the body, and that is a perfect fit. All right, so one thing I wanna mention again, since this pod is down and to the right as you stand behind it, these 3 screws, 1, 2, and 3, no problem getting into it. However, this 4th one right here, this is gonna be in the pod's actually in the way, so that's when you have to break out the little screw from Dynam. But these 3 screws right here, you can use any kind of the Dynam larger screwdriver. All right, so to secure the wings, we're gonna need 4 of the 35mm screws. So I'm gonna do one at a time here. They drop into place. Now, if you keep turning your screwdriver and nothing happens, and you don't have it in the proper location, you'll feel it snap into the hole, like that. Now, I can already feel it getting tight, and it's already sucking the wing down into the body. Okay, now, you can see right here my screwdriver is hitting the pod right here. So I don't want to really push this pod over because I don't want to break the pod or warp it or flex it. So I'm going to be forced here to use the smaller screwdriver. So I'm going to drop that down in there. Nothing wrong with these small screwdrivers, they're just you have a little less torque on them. So you have to really hold it tight. All right, the next step is where we kind of deviate a little bit from the manual. So we're gonna work on the elevator. We'll put this guy away. Now, what I wanna show you is that the manual doesn't say anything about the quick connect. So before you put the control horn onto the elevator, it'd probably be best to put the quick connect on the control horn. Okay, so this little quick connect is going to go into one of the 3 holes, and it's a tight fit in there. And what worked out really good for me, so I just took the screwdriver from the Dynam kit, and I just worked my little screwdriver in there as a drill, bored out the hole ever so slightly. You don't want to do too much because then it won't have a good connection. So then that little screw fits in there. You get at least 1 or 2 threads started. Then you can finish it with the screw and the screwdriver. Okay, so I started it by hand, and I'm gonna just get it tight by hand. You could use the pliers, but you know, this nut driver fits perfect, and then you can tighten it away. Okay, so we're gonna take our hot glue gun, and this is a high temp hot glue gun. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna glue this along with the screws. Now, why you asked to do both? Well, since this is a only point of contact with our elevator, I wanna double secure this to make sure it doesn't fly out. So now we have our quick connect mounted to our control horn and the control horn mounted to the elevator and horizontal stabilizer. Now it's time to glue this on the fuselage. Okay, so we got the foam tack on the bottom and top and then the little notch right there. This step, usually I say less is more with foam tack, but this step, it's securing the elevator on, so a little more won't hurt. So as you slide it on, make sure you don't crimp the push rod, but slide it on. It mounts good, okay? But what you need to do is you need to measure from tip of the elevator to tip of the wing. That side, and make sure it's the same distance on this side from tip to tip. That way we can be sure our wing and horizontal stabilizer are perfectly square. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure tip to tip. We're right at 51 millimeters. And this side, measure millimeters. So we're not square yet, so I gotta come this way just a little bit. Okay. Now our wings are bolted in, so they're not gonna move. This part we're gluing, so this part we can move. So now I'm right at 51 1/4, which seems about right. And this side's gonna be 51 1/4. So now we have it perfectly square. Okay, the next step is to glue on the vertical stabilizer. Okay, our glue's set, and now we can push it in place. Okay, so the manual is actually missing this step. This step that we have to do is glue and screw on the control horn to the rudder. This one uses a little different screws than what you're probably used to. It uses these long screws we have over here. because it has to go all the way through the thick rudder part. So you want to use these long screws along with the half, I guess you call it a half a control horn, and then the backing plate. Okay, so now we have our control horn on our rudder installed and our control horn on our elevator installed. Now it's simply just hooking up the push rods. All right, the last step, well, if you want to call it the last step, if you're going to make it a seaplane, is simply installing the prop. So install the prop, you put on your backing plate to your spinner. Okay, when you put it on the prop, you notice there's 4 slots in the back of the prop. There's also 4 slots in the spinner. That ensures you have a perfect alignment. Pops into place. Put on my washer. Put on my hand tighten my nut, and I'm going to come back with the wrench. You make sure you don't over tighten it because you don't want it to break any of this stuff. So after that goes on, then I'm going to go ahead and install my spinner with the supplied 8mm screws. Okay, if you're going to make this a waterplane, this is actually going to be the last step other than the canopy top. So the last step is to glue on the wingtips. Now this step, you actually can use the hot glue gun and or foam tax glue. Okay, line it up. Make sure you don't get hot glue everywhere like I just did. So we got the wingtips on. We're gonna put on the canopy. And for a seaplane version of the SeaWind, assembly is now complete. We're gonna leave the canopy open because we may make this a camera plane in the future. We don't want any obstructions from there. So all we have to do left really is just to put on the decals, which pretty much is really easy to do. But for part 2 of this, we are going to install the landing gear. Okay, now for part 2, we're going to assemble the landing gear on the SeaWind. It's pretty easy. It's probably about 3 or 4 steps. And again, we're going to go out a little bit out of order as a manual. But the first thing you want to do, you want to make sure you got all your hardware laid out so you know what you're going to use. And then what you're going to do, you're going to take a X-Acto knife and you're going to cut out the little areas on the plastic fuselage. So what I'm going to do here, since it's kind of hard to see white on white, I'm going to go ahead and trace out the line here. Now, just for the video, I traced it with the Sharpie so you can kind of see where you have to cut it out. But you don't have to do that. That's just something I did so it'd be easier to see on the camera. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out here. And be careful not to go all the way through the foam. So once you cut off the plastic on the bottom of the fuselage, you'll notice a little hole. That's where you're going to slide your front landing gear assembly. Okay, after you slide your front wheel landing gear assembly, you're going to turn it back over. And you'll notice right in the top, the landing gear comes through the foam. Okay, once you get your landing gear all the way through, you'll see a little bit sticking out of the foam. You're going to stick on your control horn. Fits right on there. It doesn't look a little D shape. Then you take your little screw it in place. Then you'll attach your control rod to the control horn and then to the servo. Once you get the front landing gear in place, now you want to flip it back over. And now it's time to cut out the rear plastic part. When you cut this out, make sure the ESC wires run through here, so you don't want to go too deep, so barely go through the plastic. Okay, here's a quick little tip to prevent cutting the ESC wires. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with one end and slowly work my way back. And that way I can be sure I don't cut my ESC wires when I get to get my motor wires when I get to that point. Okay, once you cut the seam glue with the knife, the little center part comes out. And you can see right here the ESC wires, the motor to the motor wires. They're way down there, so you're probably not going to cut them. But you just always want to be safe. All right, now you got the plastic out and the foam out. Now's a good time to trim up any kind of loose areas where you need to trim the plastic. Because now you can see the ESC wires. You're not going to worry about cutting them. Okay, once you got that cut, you notice the 3 ESC wires we talked about. The wires that go from the motor to the ESC. Then we also have a nice, looks like a carbon fiber plate that the landing gear is going to get attached to. Okay, the next step after we cut out our little notch on the plastic and remove the foam is to install the landing gear. Now what I found a little easier is to install one landing gear before we slide the landing gear underneath the wires, and then the second one will go after. Okay, what you need to do, you need to feed the landing gear underneath the 3 wires from the motor to the ESC, just like so. Go nice and slow, make sure nothing binds up. So once you line your landing gear up, take the supplied screws and tighten it down. Okay, once you tighten your last screw on the landing gear mount, then it's time to install the final tire. So again, you go with your screw, and you put your nuts, then your wheel goes on, and then your last nut goes on top of that. Now here the manual actually calls for a little bit of glue. You could probably use some thread locker or some hot glue on the very tip. But whatever you use, you want to make sure that if you have to change the wheel, it's not permanent. All right, the final step in installation of the landing gear is to put the little cover right over the landing gear. It fits right into place. Just push it down. You're supposed to glue it. This looks like it's a nice tight fit, so we'll glue it down, and there you are. All right, so that wraps up the build for this Dynam SeaWind. Part 2 of this series is going to be flying. The videos are flying. We're going to have one part where we're going to take it to the lake or pond and fly it off the water. And part 2 will be when we take it off the ground from our flying club. All right, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page for notifications when part 2 come out. And this is Basil with Grayson Hobby. Hope you enjoyed this video.